Hi, Amy.
I heard that recording in progress.
Good. That's what we needed to hear. I I was trying yesterday. I was trying to wait till you got on before I did it because I didn't want it to be weird that all of a sudden you popped on and it was on. So I turned it off, and then when I turned it back on, it didn't work.
Okay.
I should have had a 13-year-old to help me. That's what I should have done.
You know what? That's what I do for all of my technology these days. I just ask a kid.
Yeah, intuitively they know how to do it. The rest of us were like monkeys looking at a math problem, scratching our head. And
Totally, they do amazing things. Too bad they can't get paid for it.
I know. Yeah. So how you doing?
Doing good. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good.
You have a good day?
Yeah, it was eventful. So that was good. I started doing a part-time job just because I want to see how much I'm able to start working and trying to get back into things. Plus, just sitting around the house just isn't fun for me. But it's working with a homeless population. So, that's something that I like to serve underserved populations. It's just something that makes me feel good. At least if I'm going to go to work, I want to feel good when I do it.
Did you seek that out, or did that seek you out?
Well, it kind of, it's funny. It's kind of like it sought me out. I talked to the owner of the center that I'm working for, and he said, with your experience, we could really use you. I said, like, I can't commit to doing supervisory work right now. I'm just not healthy enough. But he said that they had some paperwork they needed to have reviewed, and since I used to be a clinical supervisor, he thought that would be a good fit. So it worked out. And, it's nice. I just sit at a desk and do some paperwork review and some audits, and it's kind of nice. And, today I got to see a couple clients. So that was a treat for me. So
Kind of exciting.
yeah. So it kind of got some of the rust off of me a little bit. And
Yeah, I think it is kind of like riding a bike. I haven't jumped back into any of that. When I got sick, I had 8 clients.
yeah.
I was in my practicum at that point. And one of the saddest things that hit me when I was sick in the hospital was, my gosh, I abandoned these clients. Like that's like the first cardinal sin that you have as like a clinician is abandoning your client. I literally was there one day and gone the next. Like I had no.
And they don't have a clue because nobody tells them anything because HIPAA and all the privacy. And
Yeah.
so I had a doctor who had that happen. My favorite doctor, by the way. She just was so caring and so loving. I mean, I've had a lot of good doctors, but this was a doctor that was just different. So I really connected with her. And and then she got sick, and all of a sudden she was gone, and I couldn't. I got better, so I was coming back from Arizona where I got my heart transplant. And then I was coming back. I wanted to see her, and she was gone. And, of course, they can't tell you anything. So you just kind of.
Yeah. And then you all often wonder, why did you have to go to Arizona for your heart? Do you have to go where the heart is? I thought the heart comes to where you.
The heart will come to you, but you have to be within like I think it's like a 4-hour time frame. So they have to extract the heart and then put it in me within 4 hours. So I had to be close enough to where, they could do that. And in Minnesota, they said that, you may never get a heart just because there's not enough people on the donor list. And, just when you go to Phoenix, there's a lot of highly dense populated cities that can draw from. So there's a lot more death that's going on, and just made more sense. And, I got it within 2 months from when I went down there. So it was a good call.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to, I feel like I'm looking over to the other direction. Let me see if I put it this way. Does that seem more normal?
Yeah, that looks fine. Either one was fine. So it's up to you, whichever you prefer.
Did I seem like I was like, I feel like I'm looking over there somewhere.
Well, that's going to be confusing for you. You do whatever is going to work for you. So that's it.
Oh, it's fine for me. I just wanted to make sure that your video like comes out looking like we're actually having conversation.
Yeah, well, if you notice in my videos, I'm looking off to the side, so it's the way it goes. And I'm not really I'm not one of those
Well,
people.
Tim, right now you look like you're looking right at me. So I just, as long as that I look like I'm looking normally, that's fine. I just want to
Yeah,
make sure,
I've got
since
it.
we're both kind of new at this.
I know. Oh my goodness. And that is so true. I have no clue what I'm doing with these things. I used to be pretty computer savvy, but not being in the work field for almost 6 years now, it's you lose a lot of your skills and just some of the confidence, I think, with it, because I was willing before. I'd try I'll click this button, I'll click that button, and then
Yeah.
I'll just reboot it and start it over. It's no big deal. Now I'm too nervous to do that. I don't want to really wreck things.
Erase everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty scary these days.
Yeah. Well, do you want to get started?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. Well, we kind of got started already. I'm not sure how good I'm going to be at the editing, so I'm just going to be open about that. I think I can cut off the ends and off of both ends. I'm not sure how I'm going to do with the middle, but
Yeah.
I'll just kind of introduce myself a little bit. Brian Hoyland. I used the pseudonym T.S. Dismas for my book, but I wrote about my near-death experience, and I died for over 10 minutes in 2017, cardiac arrest, and had many years of being in end-stage heart failure due to my autoimmune disease that I got while I was in the service. And that's how we met. And we met because you read my book and you heard my story, and you reached out, and we hit it off. And when I found out about your story, I think I'm probably more impressed with your story. Your story, you actually had to do something to participate in it. All I had to do was die. So it was pretty easy for me.
Yeah, all you had to do is die.
Yeah. Well, as far as work goes, I had no choice. It happened. So I was going to die anyway. But the blessing I got is just something that I can't take credit for. This is something that I didn't participate in really. And yet when I look at your story and stories like that, I really get inspired, because I can see God working the way that I felt him in heaven, and that to me is so beautiful, because when I can, when those hairs on the back of your neck stand up because you hear somebody's story, and it just really makes you just get that sensory response, and in your heart, it just feels light. That's beautiful. And so, I'm just going to quickly introduce you, and then I'll kind of let you take over with a better introduction. But I have Amy Whittaker with me today, and we're good friends now. And like I said, I came across you because our paths have met, and I don't want to talk too much about what I'm really excited about for you to share. But why don't you tell us? Well, you can start it from wherever you want. How about that?
Yeah, honestly, I think my interest in the subject of near-death experiences is probably how I discovered you. I'm one of these people where I'll seek out and go to YouTube, look at videos of people that have experienced a near-death, and I think back in the '80s, Melvin Morse came out with "Closer to the Light," and that was a bunch of accounts of children and their descriptions of what they encountered when they had a near-death experience. And I found it so captivating because the complexity of the stories these kids had was too advanced to be made up. It wasn't fantasy. It wasn't a dream. I refuse to believe it was a hallucination or neurotransmitters being emitted at the moment of death. I think it was too specific, too detailed. You can encounter near-death experiences of people who were raised in an atheist environment, and yet a child comes back describing Jesus, talking of heaven and angels and things that they were never exposed to.
Right.
And even they could even be in a different faith practice. And so I was so deeply impressed with that. And my interest from that basically came, as a kid, I always believed in God. I've never had a point in my life where I wondered if there was a God. I've always felt a surety that there was God, that he was there, that he was a part of my life, that he was a part of making this plan for me and where I was going in my life. And when I was a kid, my dad lost his youngest sister. He's one of six and has five sisters. And his baby sister, as an adult, had melanoma, and it was metastatic melanoma. And she died at 27 years old. She had a little baby. And it really rocked our world as a family. I just remember seeing my dad utterly devastated, his sisters but her parents, most of all my grandparents, that, they carried her picture. If they came to visit our family, my grandma would put my aunt's picture up on the dresser. She just carried my aunt with her everywhere she went. So I had this kind of fascination about what was after this life, like that there was something connecting us to the next life. And so the near-death experience fascination kind of started to flesh out some of that curiosity that I had about what's after this life. What is heaven? What comes next? And as I grew, we experience death and dying. Often it's our grandparents that we lose. And I lost my dad's parents, and you expect those things to happen. They're older people. And then I lost my mother's mother, and I was privy to being there when she died. She literally was on her deathbed. I prayed for her. She had her eyes shut. My mom was sitting next to her, and I left the room. And my mom said her eyes opened, and she tracked me leaving the room. And then she looked directly at my mother, and my mother said to her mother, "It's okay, Mom. It's okay to go." And she watched her mother close her eyes, take a deep breath, and like she was diving into an ocean, she entered into the next life. She
Yeah.
literally closed her eyes, took a breath, and passed.
Yeah.
And that fascination, and then I was able to go back in there and see her, and I have never seen my grandmother look more beautiful. Her every muscle on her face was relaxed. She was just pristinely beautiful and at peace, and in the body that she had left behind. And I just became so fascinated with the process of dying, never thinking that I would get really close, intimate
Yeah.
encounter with it. My godson at the age of 18, he came to visit me a couple times, and we were pretty darn close. He lived right down the street from me. He came to visit me. He was obviously carrying a burden that he couldn't share, and he took his own life. And it caught our entire family totally off guard.
Yeah.
His death was very unexpected. Nobody saw that handwriting on the wall, and it just devastated everybody in the family. He was such a bright sunbeam of light and love, and to lose him so abruptly without any kind of forewarning, or we were all kind of left in this state of chaos and confusion, wondering what we could have done to prevent that from happening. And I was in the shower, and at this time that my godson passed away, my brother was fighting for his life with cancer. And my brother was in his early 40s, diagnosed with colon cancer. And, he was fighting for his life, all kinds of chemo, going through all kinds of hell. And so we were particularly stricken as a family with a lot of trauma at once.
Yeah.
And one day I was just taking a shower, and I just sort of felt like this voice in my head. And some people will say, I don't know if it was my voice or it was a voice. I feel like it was somebody else's voice. I feel like it was my godson's voice. And I feel like he was saying, Aunt Amy, I'm so sorry. I wish I could take it back. I would take it back if I could. Could you just please tell everybody I'm so sorry and that I take it back. And then I just started feeling like I had to write his story, his remorse. I had to put it into words. And so I wrote a book called After, Then, and Now that was a hugely cathartic um, exercise on my part, but I really felt like I was guided by my godson from where he was in the afterlife to share a message to the people that he loved, that he left behind, and without really considering what his death would do to them, and he just wanted to express to them, and I felt like I all of a sudden became his voice.
How old was
And
he
then
then?
he was 18.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was 18 years old. um and my son Gabriel and my nephew Max, who was Christian's brother, found him. And so it was very visceral, real trauma to our family. And when we couldn't find counselors for Gabriel and Max, I said to myself, I'm going to be a counselor someday. I want to fill this place where in our small town, there's no counselors that can address these kids who are totally grief stricken, have nowhere to go.
Mhm.
And, you know, fortunately, we were able to find, after a lot of work, good counselors to help these kids through this. But that event in our family was you know a real up close and personal encounter with death, when you don't think it's right, when it shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
Um, and then I lost my brother to cancer after he fought for 4 years, and that sent our family reeling. During Johnny's fight with cancer, I had started to run.
Okay.
I felt I just, I think sometimes people take up running because it is a real great stress relief. But I literally felt the need to run. And maybe that was like a subconscious desire to run from the trauma that was hitting I just felt the need to run. So I would literally run on a treadmill, run in the neighborhood. I was just running
Yeah.
all the time. And, I had small kids. Um, and I started like getting this little dinging pain in the back of my head. And I was like, man, I really don't want to have a stroke on the treadmill and like have my kids find me, collapsed on the treadmill. So I went and had a scan, and the scan revealed that I had some abnormality with a nerve channel in the back of my head causing the pain. But the real concern was that my thyroid had some abnormalities, which they had to biopsy, which then turned into me having cancer
Mhm.
after I just lost my brother to cancer. So, fortunately, I felt very blessed because it didn't require chemo, it didn't require radiation, it just required surgery. Thyroid was out. I felt my experience with cancer had, come and gone. I was good to go. Let's keep going. So I was taking classes. I really felt called to counseling, and in large part because I felt that there was a real need for it. As I was going through my degree, my undergrad and my master's, which I didn't complete, I felt like God had just orchestrated this so beautifully. Everything had fallen into place. I really found a love for geriatric care. I felt that there was a real void in geriatric care. I had gone in thinking I would counsel kids, but kind of transitioned in my coursework over to geriatric care. Began working for a neuropsychologist and was really just enjoying my practicum and having clients and doing, counseling under supervision. And I kept getting like bouts of pain in my midsection, right, at where my rib cage divides. And I was thinking, man, I wonder if this is like, that thing where they say about gallbladders, you're 40, you're fat and you're fertile, then your gallbladder is going to go out on you. And I was thinking, it must be my gallbladder. I probably have gallstones. And I went to the ER a couple times because the pain got so like intense and severe that I went to the ER, and I had abnormal labs, and they saw some thickening of my bile ducts, but never really investigated. Just said that's probably gall sludge in there, and you probably should have that gallbladder out. So I was kind of pushing it aside. And admittedly, I do have a phobia of surgery. I'd had my throat slit. I didn't really want any more surgeries. So I was putting off addressing that pain. And I was starting to experience pretty severe itching,
Mhm.
you know, pretty much from head to toe, waking up with bloody scratches on my legs because I had in my sleep with just raking my skin because the itching was so horrible. That started probably on a weekend, and by like Thursday, Friday of the following week, I had really felt like I was gonna, lose my mind if I didn't get to the bottom of the itching. I couldn't figure out the source of it, and it was, the worst kind of experience, physical experience that I'd ever like. It was just so uncomfortable. It was so stressful, and I was trying to work and do school, take exams, do crazy stuff. Went to a primary care physician, and a PA saw me because my doc wasn't available. She was talking to me. She was listening to me. She lifted my eyelid and she said, "I'm sending you for a scan." She didn't say why.
Yeah.
What she saw was jaundice on the whites of my eye. And the scan ended up revealing that I had a tumor that had occluded my common bile duct, a 4 centimeter tumor that was blocking it. My local GI was completely like a deer in headlights, like, "Amy, this shouldn't be happening to you. This is a weird, rare cancer, definitely not somebody in your age group. I have no experience with it, and I want to send you to Hopkins." So I went to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. Super, super sick. My health just took a complete nosedive. I couldn't eat, I couldn't drink. I was in so much agony with the itching and the pain from the occluded bile duct. Uh, I probably lost 30 pounds in 2 weeks,
Oh my.
and was sent home, then sent back. They had to put some drainage bags in there to um, basically save me from liver failure because the bilirubin had nowhere to go. It had gone into my skin and had caused that itching.
Yeah.
And by that time, I was about as orange as, a clementine. I was so jaundiced, so sick, couldn't eat. It was a really devastating time because the only thing I could think of was my parents.
Yeah.
You know, when your parents have lost a kid to cancer, and
Mhm.
you have specialists telling you, "Hey, man, this is not something you're going to survive," that you'll be so fortunate if you make it a year. If you refuse treatment, you won't make it 6 months.
Mm.
With treatment, it'll probably be a year. And if you have really good luck with your treatment, 3 years. That's your, you know, and these doctors cried as they told me this. They didn't want the lady with the 12 kids to die from, cholangiocarcinoma. So um, it really, my entire family was just thrown into this washing machine of like, we'd had all these bad experiences, bad outcomes with cancer. And, this didn't look good. People don't survive this. 95 to 97% of people with it are dead, by 3 years. So they weren't lying to me. They were just going by the science that
Mhm.
informed them of what the outcome is for people with that kind of disease. So they told me, "Hey, you got a bucket list, do it."
Yeah.
So I traveled. I made memories with my family. You know, the time kept turning over and turning over, and we kept trying to make significant memories with each other, and I stayed alive. Uh, at a certain point, the pain from my pancreas, because I had all this stenting and tubes and stuff down there. My pancreas was like a mad, angry beast inside my belly. And it was causing so much pain that they couldn't control it without putting me on hospice. So went on hospice, went on a lot of drugs like fentanyl, morphine, anti-nauseas, just basically drugs that just took me out of this world. I was just laying on a couch. I was just slowly dying. My weight was dwindling. I didn't even care if I ate. I just lay there. And I had a hospice nurse take some blood work one day, and she came back a couple days later and said that my blood work was pretty good. And I was just like laying on my couch, and I looked at her and I was like, "What do you mean?" you know what?
Mhm.
And said, yeah, your blood work looks pretty good this week. And man, something just clicked in my mind. And I made a decision. I'm not taking any more drugs.
Yeah.
I literally I pushed that drug box away and I didn't take any. And I didn't sleep for 48 hours and was completely a lunatic. And my took me to task. She was like, Amy, you can't just stop taking all these drugs. You gotta wean. Let
Yeah.
me wean you.
Yeah.
She was so afraid I would stroke or a heart attack because I was just I couldn't sleep. I was shaking, rocking. The withdrawal was just vicious,
Yeah.
vicious withdrawal. And it took me about a month and a half to get off of everything because I did let her wean me. And
Well, yeah, some of those drugs you absolutely have to be weaned off of. Like
yeah,
you said you were on Ativan. I mean, those heavy duty benzodiazepines, you have to, or you can die. You can die from that.
they put me on that Ativan because but when I was in the throes of the itching, I was like, just give me anything.
Oh yeah.
And Ativan was what they gave me to fill me out.
Yeah.
And I had been on, and from the time of diagnosis to the time on hospice, it's been 4 something years that I've been on a pretty good dose of Ativan to keep me calm.
Mhm.
And that was probably the worst withdrawal that I had was from Ativan.
Yeah.
People think fentanyl must have been horrible, morphine must have been horrible, Ativan was horrible.
Yeah.
But and I do have a newfound respect for people who go through withdrawal.
Oh, yeah.
It really takes tremendous willpower, and by the grace of God, by the gifts of God that He's given me, I do have that kind of will, and it's all God given. And thank goodness I was able to get through that, and literally just willed myself to live. And I started to eat, and butter, heavy whipping cream, like any kind of fat
Anything
food
with calories.
I could eat. Yes, I was just loading and just slowly just making myself do it. And I just had to will it to happen because my body was so I don't know, set on dying, maybe because my mind had been so set on dying. I had really accepted death at that point. I had prepared for it. I laid all day long thinking about it. I would sometimes just close my eyes and say, God, I'm ready.
Yeah.
I had had the last rite for the anointing of the sick. I had confessions. I had felt spiritually ready for it. I felt physically ready for it. And I told God, if this is your will for my life, I'm ready.
Yeah.
And that thing clicked with I started to have that turnaround in my thought process and started building my strength back. And the weird thing was, Brian, when I got off all the pain meds, there was no more pain.
Yeah.
No more pain. And then I had a scan and it showed that the cancer had not progressed.
Yeah.
And then, I just felt like, hey, this is the weirdest thing ever.
Mm.
But I'm just gonna go with it. Like it was just like being in like just this the strangest, most unexpected experience that I could ever imagine myself in. But I learned so much about where my control begins and where it ends,
Yeah.
and how ultimately God always the one that's designing what's happening to us. And I had known that from just the divine providence of how He provided for my family as I was having 12 kids and
Yeah.
trying to make ends meet.
Talk a little bit more about that, because that's where I wanted to tie that into, is that your whole story that is built on faith, and getting to the point where you were dying, and this cancer was killing you. I mean, you were on death's door, but to be able to get to that point, you had all this faith built up in your life, just pieces of it over and over. And I talking with you, I know you've talked about the golden thread that you've seen weaved in and out of your life, and that has kept you close to God, is that seam. It's pulled you really close into a relationship with Him. And I think that it's just kind of expanding on your journey that way would really help people to understand. just how you made it through being on your deathbed for all those years.
Yeah, so all that experience with those physical things, as a youngster, like I said, I never doubted the existence of God, and my mother's example of loving the creation. You know, she taught us as kids to look at the world, to look at an insect and an ant, and to appreciate that this is made by God, and not to smash an ant or like to kill a spider needlessly, or
Mhm.
to do things to harm anything. She was just a no harm teacher. And the value of creation and the beauty of creation as God's gift to us, and our responsibility to respect that. So that was kind of like the seed of the faith that I had, and the relationship that I had with God. It was very much, uh, you know, a creationism type appreciation, just knowing that God made these beautiful things, that these sunsets and sunrises and rainbows and insects and animals and all this beauty around us was given to us as a gift from God. So as a kid, you know, I had, in hindsight, you can always put these puzzles together. Um, but as a kid, I remember finding this book about a child with autism, and I saw, you know, it was a book with illustrations, and I read this book, and I was so fascinated with an autistic person's experience with the world, and how they experience life and living, through this. Every autistic person's an individual. You know, if you've met one, you know, the next one's going to be different. But I had such a fascination with it as a child, and then um, when I moved to Virginia, I met my husband. I was 10 years old. I was his little sister was my first friend, and I started to feel very strongly that that kid, that boy, her brother, was the person I was supposed to marry. And I think that's when I really felt like I was grasping that golden thread, because I felt so sure of it.
Mhm.
I felt so absolutely sure that that's the person I was supposed to marry, that I would like turn down dates in high school and say, "Yeah, I think I'm supposed to marry Andy Whitaker." And I would get teased, and people would laugh at me and say, "He doesn't even like you." And I was like, "Yeah, but I really think I'm supposed to marry him." And I did marry him.
Yeah.
And we ended up having a child with autism. Our fourth child was born with autism. And I just sort of felt like God saying, "Hey, I prepared you for this.
Yeah.
Gave you this glimpse of what this was. And all along I knew that this was part of your story. This was part of your plan." And I've always kind of felt that I was able to recognize those little prompts, and those little signposts that God has laid out for me in my life. Um, and you know, with death and dying, sometimes I attribute um, significance to the signs. And when my brother Johnny died, his favorite tree was the ginkgo tree. And you know, I was up in Boston getting radiation, and I'm walking down the sidewalk, and I look over, and there's like 15 50-foot tall ginkgo trees just showering these golden leaves down. And I was just like, you know what? I know that's for my brother. I know that's my brother letting me know that he's with me,
Right.
that he's aware of what I'm going through on this journey as I'm fighting cancer. And that interconnectedness that I have with these people that I had lost through these little signs that they would send me. And just being open to recognizing that. That's just the kind of faith experience that I wanted to cultivate, having this openness to the things that God was trying to show me,
Yeah.
the directions that he was. And you know, I didn't my first Holy Communion, I had it. The nuns were like, "Hey, you don't know your Our Father, get out in the hallway and memorize it until you do." Because my family, my parents were kind of like the 1970s Catholics. We didn't pray these prayers together and as a family. So I sat out in the hallway on this cold marble floor, embarrassed that I didn't know these prayers. You know, I made up my mind that I'm going to memorize this. I look over down the hallway, and there's this giant statue of Our Lady of Grace, and she's standing there with her foot on the head of the serpent. And I wonder to myself, what does this mean? Who is this lady? And what is the serpent? And Why does it look like she's standing on the world? Like, I just had so many questions, and the curiosity in my little 10-year-old heart was just bursting, because I just felt such a connection with her. And I felt like she was just going to make sure that I knew that prayer. And I sat there, and it just settled into my memory. And I was able to like go in there and get my first Holy Communion and mine. And then when we moved down to Virginia, we hadn't been going to mass. We didn't go to mass. We didn't go to church. Every once in a while we go, maybe let the Creasters, the Christmas and the Easter, we would go for significant, holy days. And I just kind of like my exposure to my husband's family, where they were such a devout family, like, the crucifixes everywhere, the Last Supper above the dinner table, they said the rosary all the time. And they just had this domestic church that their house was. And I was so like blown away by this as a kid, that I just kind of resolved that, as soon as I got my driver's license, I was going to drive myself to get these confirmation classes. So I did, and I got confirmed, and I really felt like God was drawing me into a faith practice that was going to sustain me, because I did have challenges. Andy and I got married when I was 19. He was 21. We had no money. We started having kids right away. So we didn't have a plan, anything. We didn't have a house. We were just doing this life. And my faith just, I became so reliant on God and his divine providence, and it never failed. Husband on the job that needed to make money that I did. I was able to waitress in the evenings, and we were able to, just really do this thing with these kids, because it was one baby after another. There was 12.
Yeah.
So for 20 years I had babies, and beautiful, healthy, beautiful babies. And, even with Mary's autism, that deepened my faith, because I knew that I had to trust God to guide me through that. So all of these events really were the foundation for just knowing that I could rely on his providence. I could rely on his guidance, and I could rely on trusting him. And that served me so well when I was super sick and thinking I was imminently dying.
Right.
Because when a man at church said, "Hey, look at my hat, it says God is in control," I literally took that as my mantra. God is in control. Amy, it's not you. I was always like trying to prove to the world, you know what? You think I'm a dummy for having this? I'm going to raise the best kids you've ever met.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to raise kids that are going to make this world for the better, that they are going to improve the world around them. And you're going to look at me one day and you're going to say, she knew what she was doing. Look at her. Look at what she did. I looked at my kids as my greatest accomplishment. And they were God's greatest accomplishment. Yeah. God had entrusted me with them, and he knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
And he gave me everything that I needed to give them the things that they needed. And they're great kids. My youngest is 12 now. My oldest is just about 32. She's a family physician, and all of my children have carved out these beautiful lives thus far. 5 of my kids are married now. One of them just got married last weekend.
Congratulations.
So life has just unfolded in such a magnificent way. And I think the foundation of that is that I relinquished my control. I knew that God was in control. I trusted him to make everything okay. Because even if I had died of cholangiocarcinoma, like I fully expected to, like everybody fully expected me to, I knew that everything was going to be okay, that the people that I loved were going to be okay, because God was going to make sure they were. Yeah. I just surrendered my entire life to God's care.
Yeah. You know what, Amy? It's interesting, because he even put those people in your life at 10 years old. He knew, you had that feeling that this is the man I'm going to marry. But that man people laughed at you and said, hey, he doesn't even like you. And yet he stuck with you all those years while you were sick and dying. That's a man who loves you, and God knew, hey, this little girl is going to need this man in her life, and he's going to need her in his life. And then, like you said, he trusted you with 12 of his beautiful souls. I mean, that's saying something.
It is. It is. And it's a gift. You know, people always say, oh, I could never handle that. And I'm like, well, you don't know, because you don't, if you don't let it happen. And I had gotten to the point where, you know, a lot of people were like, "Ooh, Jude, you're pregnant again. Like, you're pregnant again." Like, I could see people whispering, "Oh my gosh, she's pregnant again." You know, I'd walk into mass and, "Oh, you're not pregnant again." You know, so it ended up being like a real thing for me, where I was just so challenged in, you know, by society and what people perceived as like craziness.
Mm,
And you know what? I'm giving this to God.
right.
If God's fit to give me another baby, there's a reason for it. You know, you know, I have a good, strong marriage and a beautiful home. And if God wants to give me a baby, I'm taking it. You know, I'm going to take that as an endorsement of me and my husband and our family and what we're building here and the blessings that he's given us and our recognition of those blessings, because God blesses everybody.
Mhm.
God showers each and every soul with countless gifts, like
Yeah.
things that we can't even begin to recognize the gifts that he's given us. But we've got to at some point see it and
Yeah.
cooperate with it and
Yeah.
just let him do his work.
Yeah, you know, you're so right about that. It's, you know, it's so easy for us in life to look at somebody else and say, oh, I could never do that. I could never do that. In the meantime, God's blessing us with a gift similar to that. And all we're doing is saying no before we even have a chance to look at it and say, well, maybe that could work. Maybe I could make that happen. And but we shut God out. And really what we're doing is we're denying him his sovereignty. He looks at us and says, you can do this. I know you can. He's got confidence in us, but we don't. You know, where's that disconnect?
There's a fear factors.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think as I had experienced these different deaths in the course of my life with my loved ones, certain loved ones dying, you know, the fear factor was always there. And it really wasn't until I was able to really face this true test of my trust for God and just, you know, hey God, you've got this, and I know you're going to make this okay, that the fear evaporated, that trust just completely eclipsed the fear. That, you know, because we are kind of programmed to resist suffering, you know, avoid suffering. Oh my goodness, death is like the worst possible thing that can happen to us. It's going to happen to us.
Yeah.
And if we don't get to a point in our living that we accept the fact that, hey, at some juncture, we're going to die, we
Yeah.
have to come to that realization that death isn't the end of life. It's just a part of life.
Right.
And in your testimony, when you shared that your consciousness never ceased from the moment that your soul left your body, you were completely conscious of, your mind was intact and completely recording this entire event. You felt the pop and the shake of your soul leave your body. And that kind of evidence, that kind of testimony about death and about dying, it should inform us to a degree that it decreases and diminishes the fear that we have and this resistance that we have to something that is so natural and so unavoidable. You're not going to stop it. It's going to happen. Why don't you want to find a way to understand what's happening? And I think that's where my fascination with the near-death experience and the whole psychology nerd thing,
Yeah.
you know, just wanting to get a grasp of how the understanding of death and dying and what comes next can totally transform your perspective on it.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
And that's why your testimony is completely relevant and important to life. It's not just about death. This is about living.
that's absolutely, you know, that is exactly the truth. It's, you know, when I was dying, I was having, this is before I really had the, I mean, I obviously I had this huge awakening, right? So I mean, it changed everything for me. But people can have that without having the visual scene of being able to see heaven. but I was in this like learned helplessness. I was so afraid of what was coming because I had no clue what was happening to my body. I had no control over it. I was getting shocked a lot from my defibrillator, which was a torture in and of itself because you already have a weak heart and your body's dying, and it's just torture, right? But yeah, it felt like a time bomb was sitting in my chest, and I was just waiting for it to go off, and the doctors would tell me, oh, well, at least it's working. I said, doc, that doesn't really help. The fact that it has to work is what terrifies me, but it's like God takes that learned helplessness, where we just get this idea that nothing's going to fix anything. We're just stuck, and we're waiting for death to happen, and we forget about living, because I was still seeing my family, but when you're dying, the only things that really were on my mind was God and the fact that I'm not going to see my family ever again. There was nothing I could do about that in that emergency room. But when I died, and I had my experience, but he changed everything just like that. And now I don't look at life as being this thing that I'm just going to die from. I know I'm going to die. That's a reality, but I don't know when that's going to happen. So why not live for right now and just hope for the end that's going to be coming and make it glorious. I'm going to try to make my mark here in life to be the best I can. And it doesn't happen if I sit there and worry about myself. I'm constantly focused on everything that's going wrong, because like you said, we don't have that kind of control.
We don't. And as because you're a psychology nerd like I am, the whole approach to how your mindset can inform your responses to things, how you respond to these challenges, how these challenges transform and change your perspective. When you described in your book how you wanted to come back and you wanted to glorify God because you had kind of felt like your life had not, up to that point, had not done that. You had not had this opportunity to understand what it meant to suffer joyfully, what it meant to truly commune with God, to truly have a relationship with God, and then to share that beautiful truth with the people around you. First and foremost, your wife, your children, the people that you love. We want to get these people to heaven.
Yes.
As parents, our like greatest hope is to get our kids to heaven. And when I got married, I don't know about you, but my priest was like, hey, you guys, I hope you realize this, but it's not just you and Andy. It's you and Andy and Jesus. And Andy, your job is to get Amy to heaven. Amy, your job is to get Andy to heaven. And Jesus is going to help you guys do that for each other.
Yeah.
So, it was a like almost a Trinitarian type, union in that sense. And that kind of ability to mold your mind in a way that affects your behavior and affects the way that you cope with stress, fear, worry, all the things that this life is going to bring to us, that we're not going to be able to avoid those. Like, I mean, today I was watching two of my grandkids who are like, teething and feverish. And
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, please, Lord, give me the strength. You just ask for these, like, it's such a tiny thing. And today is the day that I had today.
Mm-hmm.
And to connect with God in the ways that I could connect with him. Couldn't go to mass this morning, had these two grandkids with me. Okay. I'm going to connect with God in a different way. I made a spiritual I asked for his help as I was dealing with these little ones. And we find our mind supports our behaviors when we're able to give it to a greater power, a greater influence in our lives, when we know it's not all about us and the decisions that we're making. We're cooperating because our free will is such a tremendous and amazing gift.
Right.
I mean, our free will is, we're not forced into anything. Who wants to force anybody to love them?
Right.
It's not true love. This gift of free will that we have, that every single day that we have is the day that we have. Today is the day that we have. Yesterday's gone. Tomorrow's not here yet. Today's what we have.
That's right.
and just try to really live in the moment and really live to shine. And that beautiful light that you described when you entered into the presence of God, that interconnectedness and that beauty of light. And you had once told me that you even felt the prayers of all of the people that knew, the jeopardy that your soul was in. I mean, that to me is such a beautiful testimony about our interconnectedness with each other and with God, and how
Yeah,
our conscious.
that's such a cool thing to bring up, because I could even feel the prayers that were coming in at the moment that I was there, like in real time. That's how wonderful this connection really is. We aren't gone. Our lives are really basically just beginning when we die, because we weren't created to just live this life and then die. We were never supposed to die. God created us to live with him and to be in communion with him. It's through our own sinfulness that death entered in, but then he came and he rescued us. Now we have the ability to be restored and live with him, and it's wonderful. And we're not supposed to rush to death, because he has a plan for us. So we have to take care of ourselves and live our lives properly. And so I still go to the doctor. I don't trust them as much as I used to, because they're human beings. They have some idea of what they're doing, but then there's some guesswork to it. And
There's absolutely, you hate to hear, someone talking about their product, because it's like, don't invest, don't invest your belief system in something that somebody is giving you information they're giving you based on a bunch of statistics and numbers.
right.
That's the prognosis. And I'm still here 6 years later, surviving a rare deadly cancer.
That's right.
Well,
And they miss things too. It's funny how, a week before I had my first heart failure, it came out of the blue. I didn't see it coming. And, I don't want to knock my doctor at the time. He's since retired, so it's not really that big deal, but we did a physical, just a week before. And, my physical didn't show anything that was concerning. He said I was in good health. And, a week later, here I am being intubated and almost died. They thought for sure I was going to die. And, it's just like things can happen like that. We can think we're in really good health and we can die. And then we can also be in really bad health and all of a sudden we're healed. It's, we don't know how it's going to turn out. But if we get into that mindset that we are so convinced, you told me about this, and I'm a huge Viktor Frankl fan, but you really brought up a good point about how he was able to identify people in the concentration camps before they were going to die. He saw them giving up, and why don't you talk a little bit more about that, because that was a really good point that you made, and I think that really fits into what we're talking about.
I think when we were discussing, one of the drivers for my godson's suicide, I think was such a tragedy, because he at the time didn't even recognize his meaning or purpose in life. And the reason I love Viktor Frankl so much is because he was a psychologist in I think he was in Auschwitz.
Mm-hmm.
And he was observing the behaviors of his fellow prisoners. And there were some that had a mindset that, you know what, I'm never going to survive this. And they would very rapidly succumb to the terrible conditions, to the, their spirit basically died before their body did. And he said that there were some with such a strong and profound purpose and meaning that they had such connection to why they wanted to live, that they were able to just persevere and make it through the most atrocious, terrible things. And I talked about Louis Zamperini too, that, with his, his unbreakable spirit.
Yeah.
There is something very essential to a person's recognition of what's meaningful, what gives them purpose for life, where purpose and where is their meaning. And some people are so blind to being able to see how they impact others.
Yeah.
How just, I mean, my godson had a blindness to the fact that he was adored and loved, and he was a bright light to all of those in our life. And it's so sad that he had to learn this lesson the hard way. And I do believe that it was something that he learned, and it was something that God allowed him to, through me, apologize for,
Yeah.
to repent of, to try to repair some of the pain that he caused, by not believing and not recognizing that he had a meaning and purpose that was beyond the bad day that he was having, or the bad time in his life that he didn't really share with anybody.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's often the case with people who succumb to suicide, is that they've lost their ability to see, that there's a hopelessness. But when Christian died, he did leave a note, and one of the things he wrote in the note were the words, "I hope." And I took that as such a consolation, that when he passed, he hoped that he would be in a better place.
Yeah.
He want that was, something that he felt secure in, that belief that there
Yeah.
is something greater beyond this life. Because, like you said, this isn't it for us. We're driving, and we're aiming for something better. A good priest friend of mine, Jack Peterson, talked about how, we have this drive in us as humans, and we can misappropriate our direction. We think that it's the better job, or the degree, or the fancy car, or the bigger house, and we achieve those things, and then something inside of us suddenly wants more.
Mhm.
And there's never satisfaction with anything in this life, but that drive is still there, and that drive is the drive that God has wired into us to achieve heaven, because
Yes.
there is no greater heaven. There is nothing greater than we can achieve than heaven. And in this life, that's what we're going for.
That's so
That's what we're
cool.
going for. That is the ultimate, the pinnacle of our meaning and purpose. That's what we're going for.
That's
And I
absolutely.
think understanding that is, so essential.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no happiness in life if we aren't really doing that. If we're not seeking out God and trying to get to that closeness and union with Him, there will be no lasting happiness. Sure, we might be happy when we buy the car, or get the house, but those things
Temporary.
burn down, they crash, a lot of things happen to these physical things because they can't last forever. And when they are gone, we have to fill another one. And I even got to the point in my life where I would, and I had a really successful life. Everything I wanted to do, I was able to always accomplish. So I never really had a lot of challenges. Like, I see a lot of people struggling with things, and I was really fortunate. I think God blessed me in a lot of ways, but it also caused me to take things for granted. And that lack of gratitude can really be a detriment to people, because it holds you back. It keeps you from really focusing on. Were you going to say
I
something?
think when you've gotten, I was going to say, I think when you've gotten to the point where when you described in your book how you're in the midst of this chaos, you're in a room full of people who everybody was just focused on, like, keeping you awake, and
Mhm.
keeping you with them in the room, and you at that time weren't thinking of anything other than, like, wow, I'm dying.
Yeah, yeah, it was happening.
And then you passed into your consciousness, just transitioned out of that chaos into this place of, you know expanse, something so much bigger, something that was just indescribably huge. and,
Mhm.
and it almost makes you feel like you're just this tiny little dot, in this vast sea of light.
Yeah,
And once you described that you were enveloped in that light, you felt every sense within you that you naturally had in your earthly life, in your bodily life, expanding.
yeah,
Your see, to feel, to hear, to sense, all of your senses just expanding to the point that you didn't even, you were just so like amazed by it. Like your curiosity, your brain was still like, whoa, this is
Yeah.
almost like a kid in carnival,
Yeah. And you know what was really
you know?
cool? It was really cool that the my actual brain was dead, right? So my soul, your soul still has cognitive abilities. It still can conjugate and think. It's much deeper without the emotional piece that seems to detract from everything. Our emotions are good indicators about what's happening in life and what's happening around us, but they go crazy. I mean, we can just take a look at the world. You turn on the news and you can see crazy happening in real time. But that's all they want to show us, because I think that might be all that's going on. But the
Yeah.
truth is that there's a lot of beauty that's really happening though in the world, and our emotions prevent us from seeing that, and other people's emotions keep them, bring that out, the negativity out, because that's what they're focused on and that's what they want all the rest of us to see. But in heaven, that's all cut off. There's only joy. There's only love, because God is love. And that just emanates through all of heaven. And really it's here with us. I kind of like to think about it in the back of my head, because that's, how I was seeing my room, my body when I was coming back to my body
Hmm.
was
Yeah.
from my own point of view, but it was from behind. But it's like, that's still open. God is still there, and I can feel him inside of me and just with me, but not to the same level as obviously as I could when I'm standing right there. But that's the beautiful thing, is that we're never alone, and all those things that you've been describing are all those pieces in your life where he's intervened, and he knows when to do it and he knows when not to, because part of our growth is being able to struggle a little bit with some of the things that we have to deal with in life, because those things, it's like with your children. If you do everything for them, they're going to be helpless, and you can't do everything. Sure, when they can't tie their shoes, we'll tie their shoes for them, but at a certain age, it's really not good to have mom tying your shoes. All the other kids are going to make fun of you, plus you're going to be late to the sports or fun or whatever you have to do. But you got to know how to tie your shoes.
And mom's going to believe that you can do it. And there's something about knowing that there's a force that believes in
Yes.
in your ability.
Yeah.
And you and I had talked earlier about angels and the sense that we have and the guidance that we have with the gift of our angel. And I truly feel like once you have had this like intimate encounter with, I mean, you had it to the point where you were in it. I just was looking at it, not thinking it was coming, very, very soon. Um, but it was literally all I thought about. It was all consuming, and it was all, and I felt so part of a bigger picture. I felt like all of these gifts that God had given me with my faith, my family, knowing that I had had this companion with me all this time to bolster my confidence that God is true, that he's real, that he's good, that he's in control, and that everything was going to be okay. And there was no more worry or fear of, oh man, what's going to happen? Everyone's going to fall apart if I die. No, everything is going to be okay,
Yeah.
because God's going to make,
Right.
and these helpers that he's been, all of the people, like, every single soul, and I think about some of these people in politics. I'm thinking, oh man, they're going to burn in hell. I have stopped myself from saying those things and believing those things about, people in the public sphere that I think are such horrible sinners, because we all are. And
Yeah.
God loves every single one of us. He loves them just as much as he loves me. And he desires their presence in heaven as much as he desires mine.
Yep.
The only difference is going to be who's gonna stand in the midst of God and want it, and who's going to turn away.
That's right.
You said in your book, you can't imagine anybody ever turning away from that beauty of that love, that power of
Can't
that love.
imagine it. I
But I
really.
guess people do. I guess souls do. I guess there are souls that do, because
Yep.
hell is real, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, and there's definitely, I still, it baffles me how anyone could. You feel that love and you know that it's for you. And and it's for everyone. That's the beauty. And, when you talk about, those politicians and, the thinking about their sinfulness, I've really changed a lot of my views since I've come back, is that I really look at myself and I realize I'm probably the greatest sinner, because how do I go to heaven, see God, have this wonderful experience, and then come back and still sin?
Yeah.
It blows my mind,
No, Brian, I really relate to that, because I feel like when you feel like you're living a second life, like I feel like I really not gonna complain about anything. Like everything is good. Like I just feel like whatever happens, it's everything is good. Like I'm not afraid of anything. I'm not worried about anything. Like I told you before, I used to be a real control freak in the car.
Mhm.
That fear. I let people drive me around and I don't worry that I'm going to die. I can get on an airplane and not worry about crashing, so that encounter when you come face to face with death or even experience death transforms your perspective in the sense that your fear, your worry, your anxiety, you just are so grateful that you have an opportunity to glorify God in a different way with a different set of eyes.
Yeah.
And you recognize, oh my goodness, I used to say, what a jerk, I hope they burn in hell. What a horrible thing to say.
Oh,
I am so sorry I ever said that about any of God's creation.
I
But like there was times in my life I really felt like that. Like that person deserves to burn in hell. God doesn't want that for anybody.
right.
He
Thank
wants all of us to choose him.
Yep.
And yeah, and his mercy will cover such a multitude of the damage that we do to ourselves. But I guess there still are people that, you know, don't want the light.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, it's just it is still baffling to me. I don't really even have an idea of why somebody would do that in that moment, because I don't know if how it all works for everyone else. I just know from my experience and how it worked for me. But it's got to be pretty similar. I don't think that it's widely, just a huge variable amount of possibilities where people are going to come through and have different things shown to them. Or I just don't see it happening that way. It's too perfect the way that it was set up. And to immediately feel that love right on as soon as my body or my soul exited my body, I felt that love just rushing into me, going from a chaotic, painful experience that I was in the hospital room to that love. It was so transformative that I just can't imagine somebody rejecting it. And I think it's just this idea that, I can only assume that people who just have this hatred towards God, and they're holding on to resentments, and they want that feeling, because it's like, have you ever seen somebody who gets into an argument and they've been really tired, they come home and they're really, really wanting to just relax, and then they get into an argument with their spouse or their neighbor or whoever, but all of a sudden they're energized. Now they're not going to leave that argument for anything because they want to win that argument. It's like it's kind of baffling, but
Yeah.
it's like, I think that's where people are going to hold on to that resentment, because now they're seeing God and feeling that love, but they don't want anything to do with it. It's like, I can only imagine that's how it goes. Like I said, I didn't choose that way. I went right with God's love. I was like, hey, you don't have to convince me of anything. This is wonderful. It was so wonderful that
I have to confess the near death. I was just going to say, I have to confess the near death experience stories that do kind of talk about the other side, like a soul descending into a very dark, very scary place. Those don't fascinate me very much. I really just don't even want to know about that.
yeah, I'm not choosing that side.
I kind of just focus on the truth, the good, the beauty, the light, the love, all of these things that I know that God has created me for, that created us for, each and every one of us. And in your book, like in maybe on the very first page or second page, when you're talking about this encounter, I was so I felt so included because you didn't say me, you said us.
Mm,
You knew this experience that you had wasn't singular, that it wasn't just you and God, that this was something that you could share, knowing that was what was intended for me too.
yeah.
And that we are all so connected and included in as being made in this beautiful image and likeness of God, with our body, our soul, and our mind. And and that awesome concept of the broadness of psychology, when you think of the mind, and then the study of how that affects the behavior. A near death experience or a close encounter with death, that's going to reorient your mind and how you behave towards,
Mhm.
and I think, once you've experienced it, you all of a sudden those feelings of gratitude and that feeling of thankfulness, and just knowing that you have this opportunity with this clarity, this beautiful clarity of what really matters, and how to share that with other people, how to get them to see and recognize that there is light and there is love, and
Mhm.
that all of this other stuff coming at them from all these different directions is nothing but distraction. It's nothing but noise. And
Yeah.
that there is a peace and you said in your how you described what the atmosphere felt like, that the love was like in the atmosphere where you were, like you just felt it. It was like a blanket. It was warmth
Yeah.
and wonderful.
Well, that's really what God is. I think it's like First John chapter 4 verse 8. Don't get me wrong if I quoted it wrong, but
Okay.
God
I
is
don't even
love. But it says God is love. I mean, it's right there for us. It's been there for 2,000 years for us to sit there and look at. And when I was there, I was like, wow, it was clear that God is love. But it's
Yeah.
it's not like our human love. This is so vastly different. It's you know yeah, I love my wife, I love my kids, but when I look at a stranger who insults me, and I still think, well, what would be the best response for me to help that person get to heaven? Most of the time it's just ignoring it and kind of letting it go and moving on. But I think that that's a love that doesn't come from me, because normally I wouldn't have been like that. I'd been like, oh, well, hey, listen here, buddy. I'm gonna give you a what for on this. But
Yeah.
but God, I know, but God changes it. He does, like you had said. He has that golden thread, and he weaves it in and out of our lives, and we can see that. We have some scissors or something we have spiritually that we cut that, and we try to break free from it as much as we can.
Absolutely.
But it's like he doesn't
Yep.
stop. He doesn't stop, even in our death. And I like I said, I don't know what he does for everybody else. I had a lot of time to pray before I died. I didn't die instantly, so luckily that was a gift for me. But I think he's just so merciful that even somebody who dies instantly, and they're finding themselves in that dark tunnel, they're going to feel that love. And just don't reject it. Just don't turn away
Yeah.
from the love. Go right to the love. Cry out for Jesus. He's not going to leave you there. And that's the wonderful thing about our God, is that he loves us so much. And I can't not tell people enough. It's my favorite thing to talk about.
No, honestly, and you felt charged with that. You felt like, hey, um, I am going to make sure that I pray more, because that prayer is a conversation that you have, that relationship where that's what we're made for. You're not gonna, what would Jesus do? You're not gonna know what that means unless you know Jesus. You're gonna have to get to know him. You're
Yeah.
gonna have to have a relationship with him before you're gonna know what he would do.
Right.
And he kind of like, gave us a whole lot of information about how he handled things and what he did. He showed us the way, he showed us the truth, he showed us the light. And we just have to understand that is everything about what this life is. This life is everything about relating to and having a relationship that begins and is rooted in prayer. Prayer is a conversation. It's a being with. You and I are having a conversation right now. We are relating to each other. We have a relationship. We're sharing experience. We're sharing care for one another in this moment. And it's a million times greater when we do that exchange with God.
Yeah.
And that's supposed to be doing. That's how we're made. And your new mission as somebody who was able to enter into the light and the love and the knowledge, you're charged now with sharing that with people.
Yeah.
And you're charged with trying to get them to understand what it is that awaits, that this life isn't it. It's not over. You don't just turn to dust.
Yeah, and I think that's what really drew me to your story too, is that, we both have been on death's door. I mean, laying there on our deathbed. I mean, that's a reality when you're dying and you can't move, but you're literally on a deathbed, but it, you're on your deathbed. And it's amazing to see how we can grow and we can still share, and we can take that love that God has and still enjoy life. Prayers don't have to stop because you're on your deathbed, but it's that suffering joyfully, it's turning that into a purpose. And the people that I've met who have been on their deathbed have some wisdom that the rest of us don't get to experience, because it's that coming close to death and seeing what's really important and what's not. All that blur, that veil that the world puts on things and makes it real. I mean, advertisers are geniuses at what they do, but they're selling us a bunch of stuff that we don't need. And,
right.
It's not saying,
and I think
go ahead, Amy.
that was some of the wisdom that you and I discussed about what a healthy detachment comes from. Like you suddenly know that you can trust God, that trust that is developed when it's been tested and he's shown you his love, his mercy, his kindness, his goodness, his intention, and his plan, that he is trustworthy, that he's got this. Just let it go. Just let him have it. Just surrender. And that for the most precious things in our life. During my illness, my son Gabe was in the Army, and he would call me on the phone and say, "Hey Mom, I have these crazy palpitations." And I would say, "Hey Gabe, I have those too. It's PVCs. They're just premature ventricular contractions. I've always had, I was in my 20s, Gabe, you're fine." I literally told this kid not to worry about it. Then he starts passing out, walking down hallways and stuff. And I'm like, man, I think maybe this is something more. And he was in the Army. And so they sent him to, the hospital and put a monitor on him and literally called him, get back to the ER because you're having cardiac block. Your heart's stopping for 8 to 10 seconds at a time. He was literally no heartbeat. And that's why he was passing out. So, here's my 24-year-old kid in the Army who's healthy as a horse, facing what should have scared the pants off of me. The entire time I felt nothing but the fact that Gabe was in the hand of God, that God's got this. God's going to figure this out. I cannot fix this.
Right.
I have no control over what's happening. I was really sick and weak at the time and physically had no even ability to go be with him. And he ended up having, undiagnosed. They couldn't figure out why he was having cardiac block. They knew it was cardiac block, because it was happening in his sleep. It was happening in his waking moments. His heart would just not beat for 8 to 10 seconds and it would cause him to pass out.
How long had you been in the military at that point?
He had been in for 2 years.
Yeah.
He had been in for 2 years. And they ended up putting a pacemaker in and he had to get a medical discharge.
Yeah.
He got a great job now with Homeland Security. So
good.
God had a plan for Gabe. God has a plan for him. He's got a beautiful wife, beautiful family, and everything's great. But there was a sense of detachment and a relinquishing of control that I just felt this overwhelming peace about it, that God, I could trust God with this.
Mhm.
you know, that if this was the thing that took my son from this life, that he was ready, that he was a
Right.
good man,
Yeah.
that he knew, he understood the important things in life. And I felt very at peace and very confident that, you know what, not in control of any of this. And man, that is such a key
Yes.
to 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 fostering that relationship that we have to have with God. It has to be with trust. I mean, you have to trust your spouse. I have to trust my spouse. We have to trust these people that we dearly, dearly love.
Right.
And God's never going to fail us. So
That's
that's the ultimate trust.
Yeah. My son, my middle son, he me and him, we're really close. We have a lot of things in common. So it's really easy for us to just have a relationship. But when I was dying, and after I died, before all that, there was about 5 months before my cardiac arrest that it was just brutal. I was, in and out of the hospital. And I mean, I still did afterwards, but it was the fear that was really the worst part for me, was just not knowing what's happening. And it took a toll on my family. And particularly, my son, it was, he was with me a lot when I got shocked and got a lot of things that were happening. But after I came back and I told him, I said, hey, don't worry about me anymore. Let me tell you a story, right? And it brought so much relief to him. But then, I told him how much pain I'm in, and because he's asked me, well, how does it feel now, and those kind of things. So I told him, I said, I'm miserable, but it's emotionally, I feel wonderful, and I feel great spiritually. There's something different, something has changed. And he told me that, hey, Dad, if you die again, don't come back. And I was like, kind of taken aback by that, but he
That's love. That is such pure, beautiful love.
and it is, and it was that detachment that you're describing. He wasn't holding on to me selfishly anymore. He was letting me be free to do whatever. Like, Dad, don't worry about me, I'm going to be fine. But it's that healthy detachment, that holy detachment based on the love of God. He has grown more than anybody else in my family in his faith towards God. He now wants to be a priest. He goes to mass whenever he can. The kid just loves God so much. And you can see that because he doesn't hold on to anything in this world. And I think that seeing me die and go through all the stuff that I had to go through, I can't hold on to my heart. I have a different heart in me, so there's things that you're going to lose in life that you don't expect to lose, but you got to just be able to let them go, because God will replace it with what you need. And honestly,
Yeah.
sometimes getting rid of some of those things, you find a lot of baggage coming out of your life. And I think for a kid who's now 16, I think how wonderful his life is going to be going forward, not having to be held by anything material. There's nothing that's going to hold him and make him make decisions based on wanting to keep something that he can't possibly hold on to.
I mean, that's honestly a real beautiful example of our interconnectedness, of how that is how we can find the joy in our suffering, when we know. I mean, you would probably go through what you went through 100 times over if you knew the gift that it was giving your son.
Oh yeah.
If you knew that this is something that will change not only my life, but the lives of the people that love me so much. And I think that's often, when people look at that thing, like, oh, joy, suffering, they're opposites. There is no such
Yeah.
thing as joy and suffering.
It seems weird, doesn't it?
It's totally foreign to so many people. And we do share a common faith, so it is a very uh, often discussed thing in our faith practice.
Right.
But it's not generally thought of that way, and
Well
even
understood.
other Christian religions don't even understand. They take it. They have a cross, but Jesus isn't on it suffering. They don't want to focus on the suffering of Christ on the cross.
Yeah.
And we hold on to it, because we know what it means. We know that it happened that way for a reason. God is God. It didn't have to happen that way, but it happened that way for a reason.
Yeah.
He was nailed to the cross for a reason.
Right.
And let's not take our eyes off of it, because
Way.
it's a very important,
Yeah.
it's for the benefit of others.
That's so beautiful, because what you just said, let's not take our eyes off of it. When I was dying, I mean, I was literally strapped down to a bed so they could shock me a bunch of times, and move my arms around and do all the things that they were doing. I could barely feel anything. So it was just so much pain and over my whole body that I couldn't tell what they were doing. My arms were this way or that way. But the one thing I could do is, I couldn't move my head, but I could look right at this crucifix. And it brought me peace, because I was like, wow, you went through this. You went through way worse than what I'm going through, and you did it for me. Please, and at that point I was ready to die. I was like, this is too much pain. Take me away. But he, it was prolonged. It was a long time to suffer, but he was with me, and it wasn't just that crucifix that was with me. I could feel Jesus with me while I was dying. And, the strange thing is that there's a lot of like evil presence when you're dying, or at least in the hospital. I mean, in the ICU, I always have felt this kind of uneasy feeling there. But when I was dying, there was like a real dark feeling that was like outside the door. It wasn't in the room with me. In the room, it was actually this peaceful feeling. But I think of all the people who just reject Jesus and go through that without him, how terrifying that would be, because I was terrified, and I had him there. Luckily I got to see, and it took away all my fears, but it's something that we have to really make peace with, and we have to do it usually in our own mind and in our souls. And we have to do what you did. We have to do what Viktor Frankl did. We have to find a purpose in our life. And if that purpose isn't God, then everything else is going to be distorted. Everything else is going to fall out of place, and then it's going to cause us to go in crazy, chaotic directions. But if it's God focused, it's always going to be the straight line, and it's going to be beautiful.
It will be, and it won't be for nothing. Suffering is never wasted if it's intent, if there's an intention behind it. And as we talk about Christ and his suffering, we know what his intention was.
Oh, yeah.
We know why he allowed this to happen. We know why he submitted in the way he submitted. And we know that the greatest good came from the greatest suffering.
Yeah.
And that knowledge, that surety, our suffering is a part of that. Our suffering is transformative, not only for ourselves, but for, like you were saying, your son's witness to what you went through. It changed him. He was able to learn and gain and grow in his faith and in his perspective and in his worldview, and all of these things that are so impactful, and the way his life is going to unfold in front of him, and the way he's going to be able to serve those around him. And that it's I keep going back to it, but it's because we are all part of this great, beautiful thing that God has connected. On my support group for cholangiocarcinoma, when people die, which they often do because it's a deadly cancer, the loved ones will be on there saying, so and so passed, and it's impossible for me not to make a comment about how love never fails, love never ends. That love of that person goes on, and what you described in your near-death experience just validated this sense that I had, that not only is that love still there, but it is tremendously expanded.
Mm-hmm.
That their love and their ability to love and their ability to interact with you on their end is hugely expanded.
Yeah.
That they have become such a great force in your life. And if you allow it and you open yourself to it, you'll feel it.
That's right.
You will feel that love.
Yeah.
And you'll suddenly get promptings, and you'll get moments of peace and happiness that they're sending to you. That thin little veil is not interrupting that love that goes back and forth between you and them, and their ability to love you is so much greater. And they become such tremendous gift to you in your life,
Yeah.
so that helps grief. That, losing my big brother was a tremendous blow to me, my godson, but I have felt them. Like, I literally heard my godson speak to me,
Mhm.
and I listened to him. I believed this exchange of love that I had with him. I feel that from my brother. I feel it from my grandmother. I
Yeah.
feel it from people that bond of love is still flowing so strongly. So I think that's a tremendous help in coping with death when you're still on this side of eternity.
When and how could we not feel that? We only don't feel it if we don't allow ourselves to. But the closer we are to God, the closer we are to everybody else who's with Him. I mean, and that's just the reality of it. Because when I was in heaven, I was so connected to God and to everybody else who was there. It was as if we were all one. Obviously, I
Yeah.
wasn't God. I didn't have any powers that were beyond myself. Everything came from Him, and so did everybody else's. But our connection didn't stop for those who are still living. And that's the beautiful thing, is that in fact I had more of an ability to love, and more purely. I didn't have any of my sins. I didn't have any negative emotions or anything that was would prevent me from being a fully loving person. And so in heaven, those people who we lose, they're loving us even more than they ever had before. It's perfect. And we're foolish if we don't call on them and ask them for help and pray for them. People often neglect to pray for those who die. Why would we ever do that? It's just a beautiful thing to say a prayer, to just acknowledge the fact that somebody who lived and impacted our life has now passed on, and we care about them still. We still love them. In fact, we probably should love them more, because now they're in a much better place.
Yes. And we have to, like, remind ourselves constantly that's our destination, and that there's a joy there, and that God doesn't exist in a linear time fashion, that He's all just everything at once.
Right.
Everything was, everything that is, and everything that will be for us. That's all God is a moment of complete all knowing, and every single prayer that one of my ancestors prayed for their future ancestors, God knew about. And I'm certainly going to return that favor. I'm going to pray for them. I'm going to pray for my ancestors, because God has already kept it all in that moment. That is God. God is all in just this presentness. It's not it's just an eternal now for Him.
Right.
And everything exists in that eternal now. It's so hard for us to even grasp that concept. One of the things that I loved imagining when you were talking about your encounter with God as this wounded, sinful soul encountering the love of the universe, that how it penetrated you, it made me think of how water seeks the path of least resistance. And as water flows, it fills in all of these areas that aren't resisting it. And man, a soul presenting itself to God. I mean, let's hope we have no resistance to what is there to us, and all of those places in us that need to be healed and filled. It's just pouring into in. And we, and if you have a good relationship, you're just like, you saw the light, and you were like, man, I want to see Jesus.
Yeah.
you know Here's the light now. Like, where's Jesus?
Yeah.
So you're just seeking that completeness, and that filling of any kind of void that was there.
Right.
I thought that to me was just so awesome. I mean, my imagination couldn't really take me there, because you don't have words to describe what it's like, but I have a good imagination, and I try.
Yeah. That's really all we can do, because it's, but what made me think about, or you made me think about something that, is mortification. Mortifying ourselves in this life against some of those things that we always want to hold on to, particularly behaviors. That's really where it comes down to. And for me, I've had to, even now, of coming back, I have to work on pride. that's a big issue for me. And, for most people, but I'm not going to point fingers. I'm just gonna, I know, I could say everybody, but I'm going to try to just be humble and not say it. But for me, it is about pride. And, I've had to learn to mortify myself from a lot of things that in heaven kept that distance from God. And the sooner I was able to let him heal me and to start to work on me, the closer I got and the closer I got. That's the beauty of walking even through that light, and I described that in my story on another video, but I could feel him just flowing into me like a river. Like I always use the example of a straw, like I was a straw or a funnel or something that was just constantly coming in one end and it was going out the other back into heaven, never being lost, never being, wasted or stuck inside of me. I was completely full, but it was constantly flowing. It was the most beautiful thing. It was like this river of love just flowing in. And that river, it's like we have these ugly bumps on us, things that are just clogging up our soul that have to be shaved down. And it's his love that will shave it down, but it's our attachments to him that keep those ugly things in our lives. And the more we can get rid of those things now, the better.
I mean, that's it's basically what this life is for. So we need to get on it.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. Well, we're almost out of time. So I want to just give you a chance to have the last word. Is there anything else you want to add that we haven't covered or that you think is important?
I honestly think that one of the greatest lessons that we have a common, understanding of is a sense of sharing the peace and the love and the trust that we've learned from the experiences that we've had, and how it glorifies God to try to bring as many people with us. It's not just about us and us getting there. I know that that's all my heart is set on is achieving heaven someday. And I want all of my loved ones. I want every stranger that I encounter. I want every person that comes across my path to recognize within me the light of Christ, the light and the love that is there, and to shine that out. I tell my kids that when I drop them off at school, I'm like, shine bright for Jesus today. And they're probably so used to hearing it that they don't even, it doesn't even register anymore. And I dropped Elijah off for his basketball game earlier. And I was just like, listen, be a bright light out there. And I really mean it. I want you to really shine the light of Christ. And and not to take that for granted in the small little things, our life is what we have in the moment. It's what we have, at each opportunity to be transformative, to carry our burdens with love, and care about the people that we are going to encounter. And I think that's why sharing what you're sharing in your experience is your mission. And I think I feel charged to do the same thing. I'm so thankful. And whatever God sends my way, I want to welcome it, and I want to do my very, very best to glorify him.
Yeah, that's my mission too, Amy. You took the words that I would have wanted to say. I mean, that was beautiful. I just want to thank you for doing this with me. I really feel strongly about sharing God's love. That's my mission. Jesus told me to do this. And today, me and you, we're actually doing his will because we're doing what he told me to do. And so you're participating in my mission, but it's also your mission. He didn't tell me this is a single person. Hey, go share my love. He wants everybody to do this. And here we are today serving God's will. I'm just so excited. I just want to thank you so much.
Divine setup. It's a divine setup, how we just were able to connect and get together and do this. So thank you so much for having me. And, I hope it's been helpful to anybody who happens along this video and hears it. And I'm here if anybody has any questions at any time ever, they can find me through you.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because I think we're going to be lifelong.
Oh yeah, we definitely are. I really have already, I've got a strong affinity for you, you know, and your family is just so wonderful. And I'm going to put a link to your book in the description of this video when I do post it. I really hope people go out and check it out, because it's such a incredibly creative way to share such a very tough story, you know.
Yeah.
And anybody who's ever lost somebody to suicide, they're going to know how difficult that is. It's just a lot of unanswered questions that come about. And your book is so beautiful in the way that it approaches it, non-judgmentally, but openly, you know, and really does.
And it honestly, I pulled from people like you that have had the experience that there is an after. There is something after.
Yeah.
Afterlife, and this, that, you know, every soul encounters it, and you had a very clear, wonderful experience that you truly have the proof that is there for every single soul. And you know, we've got to try to make our own voice. For me, I felt like I was Christian's voice. He needed a voice because he lost his.
Yeah,
So
that's right. Well, God bless you, Amy, and your family.
thank you. God bless you. Talk to you soon.
All right, I'm just going to stop the video, and then I'll say goodbye to you.